to the February 10th, 2022 committee meeting of Finance and Facilities of the School District of Haverford Township. Let's rise for the pledge to the flag.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Ms. Martha Q will lead us through our agenda.
Before I introduce the first topic, I want to say something that will help make Ken's day a little bit easier. Yesterday, we had the auction for our bond bids. If you recall at the last meeting that PFM was here, they were projecting an interest rate somewhere in the vicinity of 3.6%. We had a very busy, active bid. There were 5 different bidders. There was 26 bids. And by the way, 26 bids occurred in about 6 minutes.
Oh, wow.
And when it was finally finished, we actually came in just under 2.6% as opposed to 3.6%.
Oh, that's great. That's great.
So it was a very successful bid. So now I will introduce Ken Matthews. So he can give us spend the money that we have now found a way.
All right, so we'll kind of just walk through the handful of projects one at a time. We have some of the cost update information here. Would you mind dimming the lights up front, just if that's all right, so I can see a little better, hopefully with my contacts. So this is a summary we've presented before, so it's for all the projects. It's the same format, kind of giving all the contract totals, give you an update on where we are as far as payment applications, how much has been paid to date, where we are with total contingency, and then where we are with total allowances left on the project. So I'll get into that in a second. I'll do a quick update on Linwood, where we are in general, and then we'll go to this. We also have slides in there that has the details of the allowance breakdown, so it shows all the various line items that are included in each allowance for the project. So, if you want to see that detail, we can go through it, obviously as much or as little detail as you want to see, but it's here for you. So starting with Linwood right now, the project, we're getting real close to closing it out, all the closeout documentation, those type of things. Punch lists are down to essentially the nitty gritty, a few things on the inside, but it's basically close to complete. The exterior of the building, there's some spring cleanup and whatnot. There's seeding to finish. They just pushed too far into the winter to get the grass growing, so that will have to be done in April and May. We have some parking lot punch list work to do, cleaning up curbs, those type of things. So not a whole lot, but there is some of that. But so you can see up here, there's not a whole lot of money left to bill. We're certainly making sure we hold enough for the work that's left to do. So we'll be, Stubner is really the one that has the bulk of the work left to complete. So we'll assign values to the punch list items that are open, make sure there's enough money to do it should they not finish it, and we have to get someone to finish it on their behalf. So make sure there's plenty of money there for that. Then the other cost items for Linwood, the couple things that were open that we've talked about in the past, we had the retaining wall fencing that was to go up. We had gotten, frankly, what was a ridiculous price from Stubner. It was $90-some-thousand, and we knew that was way overpriced. So we've worked with some of the CoStar vendors and with JR's assistance, and we just received pricing literally today for $58,500 to do the fencing, which is in the reasonable realm. We were holding a little less than that in the budget, but it's after calling a few people, that's about what it's supposed to cost. So that seems fair and reasonable. So if that's something you'd recommend proceeding with, we can put it on the board agenda for next week. One of the other items that's been on for a few times is the Linwood sign. So after reviewing it further with the contractor, we got a revised pricing. So we're down to it being just over $7,000. We started out at 16 or so that's been reduced. So if that's something you all want to recommend for approval, we can put it on the board meeting next week. Another item that we have not discussed that came up. So in most of your buildings, you have gym wall pads around the entire gym, protecting the stage because it's wood. As part of this project, way back when, we were in cost-cutting mode, so gym pads were only put behind the basket, so if a child runs off, obviously for the safety reason there. So we just received a quote to get the rest of the walls done. It's really 3 sides. It's not the side of the gym teacher wall, for $31,000 to get that work done, a little over $31,000. So if you want to move forward with that, we'll put that on the board agenda for next week. So then, any questions on any of those? So then as far as overall project budget, you can see what it's listed there, the projections for change orders that are pending. And then in contingency, you can see, I think the last time we came to you, the contingency balance was a little under 700,000. So after we've been closing out contracts, closing out change orders, flushing the budget out, the contingency balance right now is back up to a little over 800,000 on the project. And you can see on the right-hand side, the allowance, as we talked about in the past to you all, there were change orders that were closing out. There was a balance of allowances left. So rather than credit it back to write a change order, we just done the accounting and depleted the allowance. So there is no allowance left at Linwood at this point.
So just to clarify, for the pending change orders that are $164,000 there, does that include already the gym matting, the fencing, signage, the couple things that you said would come to the board for?
So, yeah, the only thing it does not include is the gym wall pad, because that just came up and we just received that, so it does not include that. But the wall fencing, we had, I believe, 45,000 in the budget, so it's a little bit more than that. So we do have to flush it out. So you'll have the real numbers at the next meeting, because we did not have that when this was issued on Monday, having just got that yesterday. But the sign cost, that's all in there. And all the other little change orders that are out there, which are very few at this point. Basically, JBM, from a plumbing and HVAC standpoint, is pretty much just about closed out. Westcott Electric, from their contract, is pretty much just about closed out as far as change orders are concerned. So we're really getting down to it at this point. So hopefully the goal is here to finalize everything. I'll get with Martha, get all the real costs for the jobs, for the attorney fees and any other fees, make sure we have it all audited, and then we'll have the final true contingency balance that's left on the project.
Okay, and that, so just for everyone's benefit, the contingency was about 10% or so of the total project cost.
Correct.
And that's included in the budget and our estimate of total costs, so that we have those funds if needed for, just these kinds of changes and unforeseen circumstances that come up. So is it correct to interpret at this point what shows as $815,000? Is it correct to say that's the savings?
It's essentially the savings, that's correct. When you go into the project, you assume you're going to spend all the contingency.
Mm-hmm.
So you constantly keep track of worst case scenarios. Every cost event, we add to the budget constantly, and certainly you hope to have savings at the end of the job, but the mindset is the contingency is there to protect you, to build the project, knowing that there's, a lot of potential issues that we've been able to get through, and then here you are left with the balance to move on to allocate it to other projects as you see fit.
And so I get just a credit to you and your firm's management of this project. If everyone remembers, it was approved and budgeted and begun before all of the COVID and pandemic and the shutdowns and issues that it has caused. And so to be on this side of a beautifully completed project and have that savings is a testament to the thoughtful management that you helped us achieve this result.
Oh, thank you very much. And KCBA is obviously a part of that as well.
Hey, Ken, I have a question here. So I'm looking at the pending change orders, about $165,000, give or take 164. The fencing and the signing are about 65,000 of that. Are there any major cost drivers for the remaining 100,000?
A lot of it was just lingering things throughout the project that we never got the paperwork on. I certainly can go through the list and report back to you, Dave, just not having the, there's a lot, the change order log is quite extensive, but
Punch list
I
and
can
stuff?
certainly give you some typical ones for sure.
I was curious. It's mostly punch.
Just a lot of
punch list
cleanup.
items?
Punch list, there's not a whole lot left, but as far as change orders, there's just little things, some fire alarm was added outside. It wasn't part of the design, so if you're on the playground, you can't hear the fire alarm. So you had a little $3,500 change order for that. And for the front of the building, so that stuff's being finished up. A few little lingering items like that for the most part, but nothing significant, other than, the cost you just spoke of.
Sure. Okay.
And the padding, if we did the padding for the gym, does that come out of the contingency?
Yeah, so, any of these, all these little overruns, change orders, anything that comes out of contingency. For example, some of the technology costs were over, then you have a few things that were under, our permitting fees were less than what was anticipated. So just all those overruns are what come out of contingency.
Thank you.
All right, so we'll move on to high school phase 1. So again, the same summary here. So high school phase 1 is essentially really close to being closed out as far as paperwork, getting all the warranties, getting JR, all of the operations and maintenance manuals that have all the information on everything that was installed. There's no interior punch list at this point. That's all been completed. And similar to Linwood, there is some exterior cleanup, some seating. They have to finish a few little inserts and some inlets outside, but it's pretty minor things. So all that will be done here in the spring. As soon as the grass grows, then we'll essentially be able to close out Stubner at that point. The electrician, they're pretty much closed out. They'll be submitting their final invoice for the project. So it's really, really close to getting that completely done. The only last lingering item that we have from a change order standpoint is there is what we'll be presenting. There's a little over $25,000 change order to replace the physics countertops that are regular laminate with a solid surface top. Early in the design, KCBA, a physics lab, you can do it one way or the other. I guess finding how the teachers are using the space. The counters are taking a lot of abuse, and they need a much harder material to make them last for the next 25 years. So that is really the last kind of any major change order for the job at this point. But other than that, we'll be able to close it out here. And you can see you have a contingency balance of roughly $64,000 out of the $518,000 that was in the project contingency. And then again, similar to Linwood, the allowance total allowance has been depleted, and that actually has been depleted for probably 2 months now. So really, we're close to closing this out completely.
Is that green roof growing? Is that curiosity?
The green roof is, yes, still there.
Yeah, I see a drone up there actually to see what it looks like. So, but anyway.
Yeah, it's a good addition. So any questions on high school phase 1? All right. So then we'll move into high school phase 2, currently under construction. So you can see, there's still a lot left to invoice with the project only having started basically in December. Currently, everything is on schedule. At this point, we don't see any issues. We are still, if you all recall, we did have to do a change order, $40-some thousand to move to a different roofing material because of supply chain problems. We couldn't get the original design roof until October. So we're still waiting on the delivery date. They're confident it's going to be when we need it to be in early May. So that's kind of the only thing, just I really want to hear from the horse's mouth, so to speak, that it's definitely coming at that time. So schedule all looks good. Steel's up, pretty much done. They're starting to frame the exterior walls. of the addition, so things are moving along quite well from that standpoint. And then as far as high school phase 2, any change orders, there's nothing really to speak of at the moment. There will be a few things. If you recall, behind the stage in the auditorium, there's a gang bathroom that's being added, the green room's getting upgraded, and then the keyboard lab area. That was kind of an add-on from the original scope of the work of the project. So one of the things that we're trying to finalize now, and speaking with Martha and Pete, is we have to put in the furniture order for the project. The original budget had $150,000 in it. Right now, between some of the extra space and the final cost of everything, it looks like we're going to be around $210,000, which is an overrun, of course. That's included in the budget and what you see here for phase 2. So it comes out of the contingency, like was discussed. So we're going to put that together, finalize the orders, and then come back hopefully for the first meeting board meeting in March to get the furniture improved and be able to release the purchase order to get it here this summer. Any questions on high school phase 2? Excuse me, I forgot to mention, no allowance has been spent yet. You have $295,000 of allowances. A lot of it's for curb repair, sidewalk repair, those type of things, knowing that there was a lot to do in addition to the scope that's already owned as part of the project. So we'll work with JR and make sure that's covered, but none of that will really be spent to the summer. So at this point, none of it's been spent. All right. Moving on to Chatham Park. So, as you all know, both Chatham Park and Coopertown climate control projects are essentially the same project. It's, upgrading or replacing the building's boilers, adding a chiller to the project, so you have full climate control of the buildings. There's a few nuances, a little different with each building, but it's essentially close to the same project, other than Coopertown gets a full electrical service upgrade from PECO because it can't handle the load of the new chiller. So as far as Chatham Park, you can see here, there is some allowance money that's already allocated for some fencing on the site, not much there. And then as far as overall project budget, you can see the contingency balance here is $290, but fast forward already just within the last few days, there was a few things missed on the plans for Chatham Park, mostly if you recall, there was an add alternate to replace all the counters around the perimeter under the windows. Well, on the plans, there was a number of rooms missed. So there's another approximately $32,000 that this contingency needs to be lowered by. So we'll have that full update for you next month, but wanted to at least point it out here. We just literally got the numbers, so we have to fully vet them. We don't even know if they're correct yet or not, so we'll be doing that here over the next month. One of the other things to point out with the project schedule, so everything's falling in line. Don't see any real issues. The only one issue is the chiller. The manufacturer that's doing it, so the whole building is getting Johnson Controls. It's getting Johnson Controls equipment in all the classrooms. Johnson Controls who takes care of, 70% of your buildings here, from a control standpoint, is doing it. But for some reason, the chiller is 40 weeks out. We were told, so if you do the math, that's basically November. We looked at, and we were told, by the way, during design just 3 months ago, that it was like 20 to 25 weeks. So, we purposely planned to understand how far out it was. So we've discussed it internally. We did get pricing to get a different manufacturer of the chiller. It's significant cost increase. When you buy the contractors buy a package like this, they're buying everything from Johnson. Now you tear out $100,000 piece of equipment, $150,000 piece of equipment. For both projects, it's about estimated in a $60,000 to $70,000 add to change manufacturers. For the long term of the building, we've discussed it internally. It doesn't really seem to make sense for a number of reasons. The cost. Now you're introducing another manufacturer that you don't have anywhere in the district. Now you have to get another maintenance contract with another company. Aside from the fact that the bulk of the buildings have air conditioning in it, albeit, window air conditioning in it. So the new systems will be installed, all the new piping. Each classroom will have all the new fan coil units in, bringing in all the fresh air. So the only difference is the chiller main will not be turned on until it gets on site. It just seems to make the most sense. And practically speaking, for a chiller that's going to be there for the next 30 to 40 years, if it shows up, just call it November 1st-ish. It's 2 months past when you would have hoped for it, but it will basically be plug and play. It will show up, take a week to kind of get it up and running, and we're hopeful it can come sooner, but for right now, that's the plan. So all the other systems, the rooms, all the scope of the work will be complete. And that's, again, for both Chatham Park and Coopertown. So do you have any questions about that or concerns? So cost-wise, similar to Chatham Park, Coopertown, there was a few items that added up quickly. So, excuse me, I have to forward that. It's time to get progressive lenses. Beautiful part of aging. So right here you can see the contingency balance is 267. It's actually, so between a few things that were missed, again, the counters, which is at Coopertown estimated right now at about 57,000. Some casework that was missed in the kindergarten classroom, another 15,000. And then we're in discussions with it now, but automatic blinds in the gym were included in Chatham Park. They were not on the plans in Coopertown, so that was another miss. So really currently the actual contingency right now is looking at about $164,000. But we're reviewing all these numbers, seeing if the blinds are even necessary, be working with JR on that. We'll go through the counters that were missed and some of this other work and make sure we get the correct number. And then we'll be back next month with the corrected contingency amount.
Hey, Ken, by the way, just as a general point here, could you kind of break down the difference between spending things on contingency versus spending things on the allowance?
Okay, sure. So the allowances, a lot of the allowances, for example, let's take Linwood. A lot of it was for unknown soil conditions. So we dug up underneath the parking lot. You got bad soil. You have a unit cost. So you use the allowance knowing that it's there. So you set it up at the beginning of the job. The allowances are part of their contract. Mm-hmm. So that's already in the contract. It's completely separate from contingency. So you use it. We put in some man hours there, for a carpenter, painter. Something comes up at the end of the project, the district needs an additional TV hung on the wall, those type of things, so you can use the allowance for that. Contingency is pure overrun, so most of your change orders that would come, if a budget line item like furniture we just talked about is more than what the original budget was, the contingency takes care and picks up all those overruns on the project. So that's really the big difference.
Okay. In other words, you want to spend the allowance, you don't have to spend the contingency.
Well,
More or less. It's part of the contract.
The allowance is already part of the contract, and you don't have to spend the allowance.
Right.
Yes,
Right.
That's right.
Okay.
So for Coopertown, I think I covered everything for that. And from a general schedule standpoint, the whole idea is right now, everybody's on board, all the submittals are in. The goal would be to start the beginning of May on both projects. There's a little work to do outside, get in the boiler rooms once JR shuts the boilers down for the year, to get a jump on the summer and get as much done as possible. And, both are on target for phase 1 to be done at the end of August for the start of school. And then phase 2, which is finishing 17 classrooms at Chatham Park, 14 at Coopertown, will get done summer 2023. And I hope I didn't miss anything. I think I got it all. Any questions about any of the projects or cost? There is, as I said, here's a summary of the allowances. So here's Linwood, you can see. So you have, if there was rock removal, soil replacement, you have carpenter allowances, painter allowances. So that's kind of the general idea, Dave. And you can see high school music wing has a lot more for repairing curbs and those type of things. So that's the more detailed breakdown to see. So as we spend these, high school music wing, probably not much will be spent until really we get into the summer. And then Chatham Park and Coopertown have, similar allowances for some man hours, especially working in the existing building if there's issues that pop up. So instead of writing a change order, hey, this pipe's in the way of the duct that we never could have known, how about you spend 2 hours, move the pipe, you use this allowance, and then there's no, change order for it. And, Coopertown has basically the same thing. Any other questions?
Thank you.
All right, great. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken.
Thank you.
Well, Ken has spent the first part or the bulk of the bond that I just discussed earlier. Now, the next gentleman is going to spend the rest of the bonds. Kevin DiPoalo is our Director of Transportation, and he's here to talk about buses.
All right. Good evening, Dr. Rushi, Ms. Q, members of the school board. I am here tonight, and this is a tough one to see. Very colorful, but tough for sure. On behalf of the Transportation Department, to propose the purchase of some alternative fuel-powered school buses. Just about a year ago, I had the opportunity to meet with Dr. Rushi regarding the age of our fleet. And we really were able to break it down and look at, how old our fleet is, and having 17 buses, as you can see in the orange, that are 15 years or older. Average lifespan for a school bus is about 10 to 12 years. 15, you really want to retire those school buses. So as you can see, at that time we were at 25 school buses that were 15 years or older. And, we were so gracious to get 10 school buses last summer. And they were our 2022 school buses. And we are proposing 10 more school buses this summer for the year 2023. Now, some of these buses that are 15 years or older, we've had great preventative maintenance. Our 3 mechanics do an awesome job. So we're able to keep those buses on the road a little bit longer. But, we kind of laid out a game plan here where we're looking at 10 school buses for the summer. And really that's based off of a replacement year of 12 years. So those 12 years, we'll do a great job of maintaining those buses and using the alternative fuel. We really want to get the propane buses off the road. We've had some really good grants that we're involved in through Volkswagen, through the EP Act. And right now we're actually currently waiting a grant that was kind of towards 5 of our school buses that we traded in last school year. And what the grant was, up to $165,000. So 5 of our school buses went to a salvage yard, completely got demoed, drilled a hole in the engine block, cut the chassis to get those diesel buses off the road. If we do get that awarded, that's a $165,000 grant. So There are a lot of grants out there for alternative fuel. The district made a great decision, I think, in 2015-16, where we purchased those first set of, 2017 propane school buses. So, and as you can see on the right side in the yellow, it just breaks us down where we're at 10 school buses this summer. And we're really playing catch up here. We're asking for another 10 school buses, the following. And then really where the yellow meets the green, that's kind of where we're going to get caught up and back on track to those, 12 replacement years, where we have those school buses here for at least 12 years. And again, if the mileage is good on them and our mechanics feel that they're safe and they pass inspection, we can keep them, of course, and use them in district, maybe some sports trips, but that's kind of what we're looking at. And this next page here just kind of breaks down our cost. So this summer, we are looking at 9 72-passenger school buses, and then 1 48-passenger wheelchair-accessible lift bus. We actually just took one off the road and out of service about a month ago, so our hope is, to get a brand-new 48-passenger wheelchair lift bus. We have a few of them in our fleet, but it's definitely, something that's necessary for some of our disabled children. So if you look at a total there, and all 10 of those school buses do have the ProVision camera system, which is about 4 cameras per bus. They're all flush mount now, which is, a federal law. And so in those 10 school buses, we're looking at $1,215,861 to purchase those school buses. Like I said, there are some grants out there that we actively seek for the alternative fuel. So, any questions? No? All right. I thank you guys for letting me present.
Thank you. Don't go too far away, given the next topic. Next topic, we have JR here to do a discussion of some restoration that we need to do at the Maintenance and Transportation Building, in particular the parking lot. And JR, the floor is yours.
Good evening. Thanks for having me tonight. Hopefully I'll be able to read mine. What I did is the first frame, for those of you who have never come down to where me and Kevin hang out, Monday through Friday. I just hit the play. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to say it. One of my grounds guys actually is, I don't know, maybe you should turn the other light. It looks kind of dark, don't it, Blue? One of my grounds guys, Dave Engelbrecht, is really good with a drone. So he droned the bus garage as it's down behind Barnaby's. So you can see the lot, you can see how many buses Kevin has. His mechanic shop's there on the left. This came out a little dark. It looked better on my computer.
It's okay.
Is it okay? So you can see the lot, how it is. It's all fenced in. How many buses? He has roughly, 72 buses that back there. Back here in the corners where the maintenance guys park all their trucks, and behind there is a generator that runs the whole complex. So, hey, if you're ever down in that behind Barnaby's, you want to stop by and visit us, come on down. We're always there. So this is kind of like a little overview, so you know where we're at. So what we're looking to do, we're presenting tonight, is to redo that whole lot, parking lot, fencing, lighting, electric, generator. For some of you that don't know, this used to be a landfill, 50 years ago. So we are having let me just switch. Oh, Blue, shouldn't I just hit the arrow goes to the next one? All right, there you go. This is what the parking lot's looking like. It's deteriorating. It's what they'll call alligatoring. It's just falling apart. The buses are basically, they're killing the parking lot. It needs to be redone. it's everything's sinking. This is the electrical that's, I guess, been here way before me, that is powering the mechanic shop and the fence line. I'll show you another picture so you guys know. All these boxes that you see, like the box in the middle, the buses get plugged in when it's 30 degrees or below. Kevin has to plug in all his buses so they start up at 5 o'clock in the morning. That wire that's going across is a feed to Kevin's blower that blows the snow off the top of his roofs when it snows, so we have no snow on the roofs. When the buses driving down the district, we like to put that underground. All the piping was put along the fence line. You can see the fence has been damaged, the pipes are damaged, all the fencing needs to be replaced, all the piping needs to be put underground, and all new outlets need to be installed for his 72 buses. That's a light pole. Like, he only has 2 light poles in the whole parking lot. So lighting's bad down there. We did salvage all the lighting poles from old Linwood, so we can reuse them into the bus parking lot to light up the whole parking lot for them when they're there at 5 o'clock in the morning. You can see how the fence is, you can see how the parking lot is. It is not in good shape. And then there's this 1996 100 kW generator that we're looking to replace. And just to give you a little history on the generator was repurposed from old Manoa, I was told. Just so you know why the generator is so important to the district and to the township is, if we lose power in a snowstorm or tornado or whatever, that generator runs the whole building, runs the mechanic shop, and runs our pumps, diesel and gas. The township gets their diesel and gas from us. So if our generator's not running and we can't give diesel and gas, the fire trucks, the police trucks, the ambulances aren't getting gas or diesel. So it's a very important, me personally think that is the most important piece of equipment we need to run. So that's in there to get replaced too. Then we're gonna move on to Kevin's most important piece of equipment, and Kevin can talk about the grant and all this other stuff. That Kevin has a propane station that fills up his propane buses, and right now I think Kevin has 26. Yep. So Kevin will be having 36 buses. That tank cannot handle 36 buses getting filled up every day. Sure. Every day. So right now that propane station has a solar generator on it that you can see the little solar panel there. Well, the problem is that generator cannot handle the buses just constantly pumping right after another, so it needs to be hooked up to electric. So we need to bring a 3-phase 480 out to that tank where Kevin's getting another tank, and I'll let Kevin talk about the other tank, because he's going to need 2 tanks that size to start filling his fleet. So in the project, we want to put in the electrical design to bring out the power so that we can hook up both tanks. Now, that is, I don't know if you can see that. Right now, there's a concrete pad. We have the 1 tank, and we're looking to put a 2nd tank on the other side. I'll let Kevin talk real quick about what he's dealing with the propane company and the grant he's going for. So I'll turn this right over to Kevin right now.
Yeah, so when the first 5 buses were purchased, alternative fuel propane, the district was responsible for the concrete pad, as well as the electric to the station. We didn't go the route of electric to the station, so they went with the solar and the generator to power that propane station. Great idea back then. Now that we're at 26 propane powered buses, we really need that electric out there at that station. We're going to get a second 1,900 gallon tank through a grant and through Wilson Oil and Propane that you know, Wilson Oil and Propane would essentially own the tanks, but we would have the electric out there and be able to provide. They've been great with us so far. We've had some issues this year with, you know, just overpowering what we have there now. And Wilson has been able to provide us with a tanker there every morning at 5:30 in the morning to help us fuel up any buses. So it's really something that's critical and that we do need. And of course, you know, with the electric being hardwired out there, hopefully this will definitely get fixed.
Thank you, Kevin. So moving on. So the scope of the work is basically right now, we're going to do a geotechnical pavement investigation on the report. And a report that the Gilmore and Associates need to do to prepare the specifications for the replacement of the parking lot. That's already been, I already have that scheduled out for next week. They're going to come out and do core sampling in the parking lot because we got to see what's underground and see how we're going to fix the problem. Because if you walk that lot, you can see how the buses are just, you know, killing the lot. And so we want to do that. And then we have SDEI, who's doing Coopertown and Chatham Park's chiller and electrical upgrade. They're going to do a design for us for all the electrical we need to power up the fence line for all his buses, also including a new generator, and fix the electrical that's out there now that needs to be upgraded. And actually we want to put it underneath the canopy so it's not out in the weather. Also install new lighting and also a brand new fence line around the property. That is the scope of the work. Pricing now, this is all, it's all like estimates right now, except for the pavement investigation, which has already been cut to do. For Gilmore and Associates to come up with the specifications, run the job, you know, to make sure everything's getting right. They're going to have a geotechnical person there in the parking lot every day, making sure everything's done right. The electrical specs from Steve Gribbs for the whole complex for the generator and for the lighting and all the outlets around the building is $17.5. The estimate cost right now is we're just going $600,000 to $1 million for the parking lot because we will not know until we do the core samples. Hopefully it's closer to the 6, not closer to the $1 million, but right now we don't know. The estimates on the electrical costs, including the new generator, would be $300,000. And also, just so you know, the generators are about 50 weeks out. Just figure I'd throw that out there. The estimate on the fence cost is about $150,000. I'm still working on that. So the total cost of the project could be $1.1 million to $1.5 million to do the whole job. We would like to take this to the board meeting next week for approval to go out for the specifications and to put it out to bid after the specifications. So that's what we're looking at, and that is it. Oops, sorry, I went too far. I better get out of there. Blue, help me. Blue, there we go. Blue, help me. You got me, Blue. I'm fine. I'm so glad. Blue is my main guy. I'll tell you, every time I got a problem, I call Blue. So thank you for having me. If you want to come down and personally look at the lot, we'll give you a tour and take a look at it and see what's up. And if you have any questions.
Yeah, and thank you and Kevin for the presentation. And I have a question that probably could be handled with both of you. You mentioned that we currently have the propane tanks powered by solar panels. I mean, I've no problem, hardwiring it out there. Could we also look at installing some more panels?
Well, we would have to talk to Wilson about that, but from right now, my little bit of experience I'm having right now with it, that thing has been down for what, how many weeks now?
Close to 4 weeks.
What do you mean? I'm
The
sorry.
generator cannot handle the amount of use that the station is providing.
Sure, no, I understand that.
So that's why they're saying that we need to hook it up with like a 300 amp 480 service out to it so that it can just run. The generator is not big enough, and I don't think they make them big enough for what his needs are.
Okay, I mean, I understand that, but
If we could, that'd be great, but I don't think,
Would that be a huge cost
I don't know. We could look into it. I don't know if Wilson can provide a bigger generator on the tanks, but that's something we could call up.
Just something, yeah, I mean.
Yeah, we could look into it.
I
And
mean, solar, I'm big into that, so I just kind of wanted to
yeah,
see,
but
if you explore
the
what's
thing
possible.
is, it is great, but right now, we're not having good luck with the solar one that we have now. Right now, for the last 4 weeks, Wilson's been out at our shop at 5:30 in the morning with a tanker to fill the buses up, and they can't seem to get it fixed.
Okay, I mean,
But we'll
yeah.
look, you know what, we'll look into it. Doesn't hurt to look into it. Maybe a bigger generator would solve the problem.
We have a big, I
can't
mean,
tell you.
yeah, there's pretty big cost here, 1.1 to 1.5, it'd be great if we could, put in more of those as well, and in addition to the hard wiring.
Yeah, the hard wiring
I see a way with a hard wire, but I mean, I'm
Yeah.
just saying if you can reduce some of that with
Yeah.
solar, that would be,
The hard wiring, you're looking at about a 10 grand cost to the district to get electric out to the propane bus, or the
Okay.
propane tanks, excuse me.
and then,
That's what the cost is.
sure, and then, just the other thing, looking forward a little bit here, obviously, the first goal of the fleet is moving from diesel to propane.
Propane.
Eventually, I'm hoping that we can move from propane to the next phase, which would be, probably an EV or plug-in hybrid type of thing. I'm wondering what.
I'm gonna bring
and
Kevin up
maybe
when
this
you
is-
wanna
yeah.
go, you wanna go to another type source. I'm gonna bring, I'll bring it here.
No, great question.
No, I'm curious what the cost comparisons are right now, what
Yeah,
the price
sure.
points are, and kind of what that would look like. If we are redoing the bus lot,
Sure.
might have to look ahead and say, okay, what do we do next, and maybe get prepped for that.
Yeah, no, for sure. This is definitely something that we definitely look, into as far as electric school buses. A lot of it's being brought up right now. I know us and Radnor are the only districts that currently are propane powered. This summer, actually, we had a scheduled demo electric bus. It was scheduled to come down to the bus park, and it ran out of charge on the way to the bus park. So one of the glaring issues, right, is the charge of the electric school bus. Costs right now, they're over $400,000 per bus. There are some grants out there, of course, to get that number down. It's nowhere near what the cost of a propane bus is. And then, of course, the infrastructure alone down at the bus park, you're looking at close to $20,000 to $30,000 per charging station. And that charging station only powers one school bus. I can tell you this in looking into the electric buses, the battery pack, which is about 9 batteries, the average life is 7 years, and that battery pack alone costs $100,000. So there's some substantial cost in electric school buses. It may be a thing of the future. I just don't think it's there yet. And like I said, that charging issue is a huge issue for us. So,
I mean,
but it's
I'm just curious, do you know? I mean, I'm not sure. Do they have the plug-in hybrid options?
they do, yes, they do.
Backup, are those running the same price?
Exactly. So, like I said, and they couldn't even give us an accurate price of a 72 passenger. It was as minimal as $400,000.
Okay.
So it was substantial.
And you say the charging stations to install those would be $20,000 to $30,000.
20 to
each for
30
those?
per station. Yeah. And what that looks like as far as, how much electric we would have to redo along the bus park.
I was going to ask you. I mean, if we're
Yeah.
if we're putting in a new generator,
Sure.
you need obviously a bigger one if you go to EV. I guess what you're saying is that it's not there just yet. But
Correct.
If we were to do it, and what's the average life of the generators, give or take?
You can get, 20 years.
Okay. But if we were eventually to move to EV, we'd buy another one, I would imagine.
We would have to, if you were gonna go that route, I would need all the specs from Kevin on what the charging stations are gonna will need.
Mm-hmm.
And then we would have to look at our own power coming into the building. We might have to upgrade our transformer at the building because I don't know, and if he's gonna have 72 of them,
Yeah.
we're gonna have a lot of power coming out.
I'm saying
So
72
we would
just
have to,
yet.
it would be a total design, but I could do it, but I think it would be a real big cost right now if you're not going that route.
That's fine. I'm always wondering if some kind of pilot program might be worthwhile looking into just to see just to kind of test it out with one or two of them.
Sure.
I mean, I don't know. Again, looking at these costs, looking at the costs they're saying for those EVs, it might be
Yeah.
prohibitive.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. No, we'll definitely look into it.
Okay.
Yep.
On the pavement, I understand a regular repaving operation like we might do in our other parking areas. But this, if I'm hearing it correctly, we don't know what's underground.
Mhm.
And I see, I understand the 600,000 to 1 million is understandable. Can you speak at all towards, what would that look like? What kind of fill has to go in, and how do we know that it's not gonna sink?
Well-
Every week I go to see a client in Olney, so I drive past that stretch where the Roosevelt extension ends, where there used to be a whole neighborhoods of row houses that were built on ash, and they're all gone.
Yeah.
And nobody's built anything else there in, 50 years, so.
Yeah, well,
How do we deal with that?
well, from talking to Gilmore and Associates, from what I understand, after doing the core boring of the parking lot, they'll have a good idea what's down there. And then that will have them, how they'll create how much they're gonna have to take out. They might have to take out 4 feet of the parking lot and then rebuild it with ballast, geotechnical fabric. I don't know exactly what they would use. I would have, I'll get that from the report, but that's why we have to do the core boring now, to give us do we take 1 foot of the parking lot out all the way through, 2, 3, and then replace it with, heavy ballast and then compaction, as they're putting it in. So they would have to build the parking lot back up. That's why you have such a $600,000 to $1 million, project, because they don't know what's down there. So once they do it, then they'll know, and then they'll build it from there.
So it's possible it could be more than 1 million too, depending on what.
If it, when the report comes, if it's that bad, then I'll bring it back to the committee and say, this is what they're saying, how bad it could be.
Yeah, because this one's a little different. This, second question I have is, I don't know how long it would take to actually do all this work, but are we gonna have to park these buses at our board members' driveways for
Well,
some extended period of time?
we would need some buses that we need to leave for Kevin, because Kevin does transportation in the summertime. We could, park some at our buildings. We could reach out to the township that we have a very good rapport with. They have a big section up top that we might be able to just park some up there. So I think we have places to put them, but yeah, and they'll have to go. We might, I don't know, how many buses you're gonna need in a lot to go for the summer, like 15?
Yeah, we may only need 20 or so buses.
Yeah.
And we actually, talked about it today,
Yeah.
where if we can move, the majority of our 72 buses up to the township yard, and I think they'll let us, kind of where the area where they have the leaf collection, that sort of thing. We'll keep our smaller buses that we use for our ESY programs, all our summer programs, and maybe 3 or 4 72 passengers. We can still keep them down at our in our employee parking area, where they're still under surveillance, and there shouldn't be any issues that way.
It'd be nice to get this done, so.
Yeah.
It would, we looked at it like 3 years ago, if you remember, but then with the COVID, it kind of just went away, so, yeah, we thought about all where we would put the buses, how we would handle that. Like I said, we would talk to the township, we got a very good rapport with them, so.
Thanks.
Any other questions?
That was just gonna be my comment. I've been on the board for 4 years, and I think I've always heard, the issues with
One of the first things we talked about.
the undulating pavement there, so, I just wanted to, take this moment to say thank you for, one, your patience in doing this, and then also, for both of your presentations to demonstrate the longer-term planning and, making sure that we are maintaining our facilities, our fleet, and being prepared to keep them in service and the upgrades to the busing. Could you just speak to a second, just to kind of get it in the meeting, about the benefits of propane versus diesel, like in terms of emissions or like air quality, like why
Sure.
that's the choice that we're making?
Yeah, so number one, it's a lot quieter. If you hear some of our propane buses in the streets, and even the students talking on the bus, they don't have to raise their voice. And that's one of the things that drivers tell us all the time. Like, when I'm in a propane bus, the students aren't yelling to be heard, you know, when they're in a diesel bus, they're listening to the engine at the yell. So the kids are all, you know, excited and fired up before they even get to school. In the propane buses, they can have a normal talk. But as far as, you know, it's a clean burning fuel, the propane. We don't have that DEF factor like we do with the diesel buses, the diesel exhaust fumes. It just, you know, there's so many benefits to the alternative fuel versus the diesel, and I know they're really pushing to get a lot of diesel buses off the roads. Not so much in the trucking industry, but that's definitely in the school bus industry. They are cheaper to run, yeah. You know, a propane school bus could be 7 quarts of oil as opposed to a diesel could be 15 or so. So, you know, they're definitely, and then the maintenance itself, they're minimal maintenance. It's just kind of, just like your car for the most part.
So yeah, a good investment.
Exactly.
A better transportation experience
Yeah.
and better for the environment, it sounds good.
Yeah, it sure is. You know, and my predecessor, I know he looked into it for a few years, and you know, for the district to make that jump and get those first 5 in 2017, that was a big leap of faith. And like I said, it was us and Radnor, and it's still us and Radnor.
Okay, that's great. And then just a question, and this is perhaps more for Martha, the $1 to $1.5 million, is that something that we would need to fundraise for? Is that part of our capital reserves? What would likely be the source for that?
My intention would be to take it from the capital reserves. If you recall, we added to the capital reserves at the end of 2021. This would be utilizing some of those funds.
Okay, great.
I just wanted to say, well, thank you again. As somebody who's new, it was really helpful to have a more thorough perspective on all of it, and it's very clear the parking lot needs to be taken care of. But I did want to just second Dave's request of just having some figures on getting some solar panels for the parking lot to potentially reduce a little bit of the electrical use. We'll just, you know, just to be able to have that information
Sure.
to know.
No, absolutely, for sure. We'll reach out and we'll get that information for you.
Great, thank you.
Yep.
Thank you, gentlemen.
All right,
All right,
thank you very much.
You have a good night.
Good luck.
They are also the 2 people who are on the telephone with me any morning when it snows or there's inclement
Yes.
weather.
What can you do?
At 4:30 in the morning, so we can
Consultation, yeah.
thank them for that as well. They're the ones driving around the township.
Blowing snow off those buses must take a while. That's a.
If you have not seen that, and you happen to be home on a day of a snowstorm,
4:30
that
in
is
the
absolutely.
4:30?
Oh, no, it's going on, like, if we don't have school, it's going on all day.
Okay.
It is remarkable to see that piece of equipment and how the drivers get all the buses cleared off. It's kind of, it's
Yeah, no,
neat.
it's
I know how hard it is to clean the roof of my car, so, yeah.
Sounds pretty cool. I was just curious about
Yeah,
that.
it is, it's cool.
Get Anna out there to make a video for us and post it on the.
Also, Dave, I think we know now where a drone might be available for
Yeah.
looking
I
at
was
the
just
roof
thinking
of the
that.
high school.
Green roof.
I want to see that roof. I want to see what's going on up there.
JR did have a
I think
picture.
some of our students who are here tonight might be able to get a drone.
Yeah, for the high school, yeah.
JR does have a picture of the green roof, except it's winter time, so it's a brown roof.
Sure.
And so we decided not to bring it forward because it really is just a square of brown on the roof. And we figured we'd bring it back when there's a little green in the green roof. He had it.
We're gonna do another one with spring.
Perfect.
All right.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, it's time to start talking about budget. And I wanted to bring forward just some general budget information to whet your appetite for the coming budget season. So this is my first budget with this district, and things are, to say the least, unpredictable and still dramatically affected by the pandemic. We're working through the process, and many items need to be fleshed out before the final budget in June. At each finance facilities meeting from this point forward, I'll be bringing more budget information forward. This is just early food for thought. When we prepare our budgets, we do keep in mind the district goals, because this is where you have made the decision this district is headed. So Our primary goal as we work through our budget, we work to provide equity, wellness, and excellence in the educational program through our fiscal responsibilities. When we work through the budget, we break it into operational parts. In the area of revenue, we examine trends, historical trends to find future growth projections. Of course, these trends need to be examined for the effect of the pandemic, in addition to the normal trending efforts. Unfortunately, we are waiting for information from various sources. The federal government hasn't even discussed a budget at this point, and our governor only presented his budget this past Tuesday. So we have very little idea of what our state or federal funding streams will be. We assume we will be at least at the same funding level as this year, but we have little indication of what the governmental intentions are. From the standpoint of the school and department budget, each year we ask the departments and school principals to provide their budgets effectively or relatively with flat growth for the coming year. There are areas of change that need to be addressed due to items like student enrollment changes, changes in programming needs. We'll be discussing expenditures at the next committee meeting. However, I will want to discuss a few major cost drivers. As we look at major cost drivers, salaries and benefits make up 75% of the district expenditure budget. One part of those costs is PEASERS, the state-defined pension plan. The employer contribution rate continues to rise from year to year. For 22-23, the rate will rise from 34.94% to 35.26%, or an additional 0.32%. This slight increase represents an additional $200,000. We'll come back to this later. Let's talk about a few factors that affect revenues. I wanted to give you a frame of reference. This slide is originally from PSBA, the Pennsylvania School Boards Association. I have updated to the 2019 information from the U.S. Census Bureau, Public Education Finances 2019, revised in October 2021. This slide shows the reliance on state or local dollars for education funding. The national average for the state's funding for K-12 public education is 46.7%. Pennsylvania ranks 45th out of 50 states, with their 37.9% state education funding. However, Pennsylvania did make it into the top 10, but it's in the area of reliance on local revenue sources to pay for K-12 public education. PA is ranked 6th. This means that out of 50 states, only 5 other states rely more heavily on local revenues for educational dollars. By the way, 8 out of 10 of the top states relying on local dollars are all here on the East Coast. New Hampshire, Connecticut, Massachusetts, Pennsylvania, New York, Maine, Ohio, and New Jersey. The 2 that aren't on the East Coast, Nebraska and Texas. I guess I should be encouraged because when I looked at this with the 2014 numbers, Pennsylvania was 46th. We moved up 1 space. And as far as reliance on the local revenues, we were 4th. So we moved down the list by 2. Unfortunately, the reliance on local revenues continues in this state. I do urge our taxpayers to call or write their legislators. Education funding is our legislators' responsibility, and they need to be reminded of that. Speaking of reliance on local sources, let's take a look at the makeup of properties in the district. I know this is small. When we look at local resources, most districts are made up of residential, commercial, agricultural, land, and other uses for their properties. The local taxes are then spread over that combination, the mixed use of the lands within the district. Unfortunately, that is not the case for the school district of Haverford Township. based on the State Equalization Board Land Use Report of 2020, the district is 88% residential and 12% any other type. In fact, as you can see, the district takes second place in the reliance on residential properties over the other districts in Delaware County. I took this one step further and looked at this over the entire state of Pennsylvania. Haverford Township is fourth in its reliance on residential property at the 88%. Wallingford Swarthmore is number 1. Jim Thorpe School District in Carbon County is number 2. South Park, a district near Pittsburgh, is number 3, and we're 4th. We strive to be the best in a variety of areas, but I'm not sure being in the top 5 of this particular category is one we really want. However, as we look at this particular comparison to other districts, it should cause a realization that we have very little land for growth. Without a commercial tax base, this places the burden on our homeowners. As a reminder, let's look at the revenues from the 21-22 budget. Local revenues make up over 80% of the revenue budget. Included in local revenue are property taxes, transfer taxes, interest, facility rentals, and other miscellaneous revenues. But the largest portion of that is taxes. State revenues include basic ed subsidy, special education subsidy, transportation subsidy, what is called the rental sinking fund. We all know it as the portion we get reimbursed for our bond payments when they had the Plan Con process. Social Security and PSERS reimbursements, property tax reduction, and items like that. As you can see, the state revenues make up just under 18% of our revenue budget. Federal revenues are Title I, Title II, and Title V, and they make up less than 1 1/3% of our revenue stream. At the next Finance and Facilities Committee meeting, we'll be bringing back more information about revenues regarding the budget. Now let's talk about some of those cost drivers that I mentioned earlier, because they have a significant effect on the expenditures of our district. I will admit to I'm stepping up on a soapbox here. Oops. There. Okay, back. There we go. First, I want to be clear. PSERS, the state pension fund, is a state system. It sets and drives the state pension benefit, the costs, the employer and employee contribution rates. The school district has no control over the pension benefit or the cost to the district. To focus on this slide, in 2009-10, the employer contribution rate was 4.78%. The district paid just over $2 million in PSERS costs, and the subsidy received was about $1 million. Typically, just so you know, the subsidy is approximately half of what our expenses are. Just 2 simple years later, the rate had increased to 8.65%. The district contribution was over $3.8 million, and the annual net increase from one year to the next was close to $1 million. Do me a favor, remember this rate. You'll need it in the next slide. In 14-15, 5 years into the slide, the rate had risen to 21.4%. The district's cost had risen to almost $11 million, with the state contributing $5.4 million. And the increase in the district's expenses for that year was $1.5 million. In 2018-19, 10 years from the beginning, the employer contribution rate had risen to 33.43%. Remember that 4.78 10 years ago? The district's net increase for the year was $448,000. I guess I should feel good about that after the 1.5. The gross cost was almost $18.5 million. The net was $9 million compared to just 10 years earlier, the $2 million and the $1 million. For the current year, based on the budgeted numbers. The rate is 34.94%. The district cost is in excess of $21 million. The state contribution is just under $11 million, and the increase in cost is just over $700,000. I want to point out that the growth rate has slowed down. If you look at the bottom part of this slide in here, the growth rate has slowed down compared to those earlier years. However, growth is still, I lost my spot. Growth is still growth. Peasers requires the district to pay over 35 cents for every dollar of salary. If you count in the reimbursement, we're still spending 17 cents for every dollar of salary. It has been a dozen years since the pension growth has anywhere near the 2009-10 growth of 0.4. And in 2021, the rate was still higher than that 0.4%. In slightly over a decade, the pension employer contribution rate has increased over 600% from that original starting point. So we're going from 4.78 to next year's projected number is 35.26. Annually, the gross number is now almost $20 million higher than what it was in 2009-10. And if the 9-10 rate of 4.78 was a stable percent, we would have paid just under $31 million in Peasers contributions using the actual salary amounts for each of those years. Instead, in that same 12-year period, we'll have paid $159,600,000 as opposed to the 31. This is an increase of $128 million. For anyone who's thinking about the state reimburses half of it, that still leaves $64 million of increased costs to the district. $64 million as a percent of our budget, 47%. If you're talking mills, $64 million from our current budget is approximately 10 mills of our budget. So at a 17.1811 millage rate, 10 mills of that would pay that $64 million that we paid over the 12 years. As you can see, the pension is the single largest driver of the increases of our budget over the last decade. I want to stress again, the single largest driver, but is something the district does not control. The pension is set by the state, and the state directs that the school districts and the employees have to pay into that pension plan. None of this is in the district's control. As you may be aware, pension reform was passed in 1718. It went into effect on July 1st of 2019. All new teachers or school district employees are on those new pension plans. However, the projected savings for this new plan are not projected to affect school districts until 2035. In fact, the Independent Fiscal Office report dated June 3rd of 2017 indicates our rates go up a little bit each year up until the 2035 date. The increases for the prior years are less, as I pointed out, but even 0.5% represents approximately $200,000. Let's kind of look at this a different way. Different thing. This slide shows how Peasers arrives at that rate. Based on the report from Peasers, 6.07 of the 35.26 is the employer's normal cost. 0.2% is for the Act 5 contribution. Remember when I said we had to pay a little bit more? That's that 0.2%. 0.75 is for healthcare contributions. When you add those numbers together, you get a rate of 7.02. 7.02. Remember those rates from 2010, 11, and 11, 12? 7.02 is about that area. Instead, we're paying 35.26%. So what's the difference between the 7.02 and the 35.26? The unfunded pension liability is 28.24% of our 35.26%. If we were at 7.02, our gross for what we'd be paying in pension is just over $4.3 million. Or if you talk with the reimbursement, just over $2.1 million versus what is projected of $21.4 million and the reimbursed rate of 10.7. Pretty significant difference. I cannot stress enough, the district has no say in any of the changes. In fact, back when the rates were reduced, and I was a business manager back then, so I can say this with authority, a lot of districts wanted to make higher payments, but were not allowed to make those payments. In fact, if you made them, they returned the money to you. As a result, today, there is a significant unfunded liability that those districts need to pay, all of us districts need to pay, to make up for those changes. This unfunded liability is now required to be recorded as part of our audit reports. When BBD was here presenting our local audit report, he even mentioned what those numbers were. Okay, I guess I can get off my soapbox now. Let's talk about a different cost driver. Another large cost driver for the district is special education costs. The district works diligently to meet the needs of our students. In some cases, our students need extra supports. Those supports may include specialized teachers, speech language support, therapies, specialized supplies or equipments, and so many other areas. The district provides those supports for the students that are identified as needing them. The district wants every student to succeed and thrive. In 2016-17, the district spent slightly over $22 million in special education costs. These costs include things like salaries and benefits for teachers, aides, purchase professional services, including occupational and physical and speech therapy, intermediate unit supports for special ed, supplies, equipment. In 21-22, the district has budgeted $26.5 million for our special education supports, a $4 million increase from that original 6-year ago amount. I do want to point out, when I'm talking about special education costs, I'm not including the specialized services, things like nurses, transportation, psychologists, social workers, school counselors. None of those costs are included in these numbers that I'm presenting. This is just strictly the direct special education costs. And to explain my chart, the blue bars are the district costs. The red line is the state and federal subsidies that the district receives against those costs. In 2016-17, the state provided $2.4 million to support our special education program. The federal government provided another $833,000 through the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, or IDEA, for a total of $3.2 million, or about 14.5% of what our cost was. By contrast, in 2021, the state and federal support had risen to all of $3.7 million, which only amounts to 4.05% of our actual cost for that year. To say this another way, the state and federal government contribution to the district's cost has dropped to $14.05 in 21-22 from the contribution of $14.5 in 16-17. In the 5 actual years shown here, the district costs have risen by just under 10%, comparing 16-17 through 2021, while the state and federal subsidies have maintained their 14% contribution against our costs. Over the last 5-year period, the district spent a total of $116.7 million. The state federal government provided $17.4 million. Our local taxpayers have provided and continue to provide the funds for our children's education. However, the state and federal governments bear a responsibility as well. Their contribution in the form of subsidies and grants have not kept the pace with the increasing student needs and increasing costs. As administrators and school board members, we speak to our legislators about funding. We urge our taxpayers to reach out to your legislators and express your concerns directly to them about their responsibility for public education. It does make a difference when they hear from their constituents. Okay, what's next? I told you that on the 8th, the governor spoke. I'm speaking now, and I promise to get off my soapbox. As we go forward, at each of the committees, I will provide you with budget information, further budget information. And then April 12th, we'll present the proposed final budget. On May 5th, we'll ask the board to vote on the proposed final budget. And then we have a few more meetings. And on June 16th, we'll ask the board to approve the final budget. So having said all of that, any questions?
Not so much questions, but comments in terms of the PESers, you know, the pension costs and the special ed increases. These are the two of the main cost drivers that impact all 500 school districts across the state.
Correct.
And, you know, school districts are limited under Act 1 in terms of how much they can increase their tax rates. And unfortunately, these mandated costs tend to exceed our capabilities through Act 1. There were 6 years in a row where the state special ed subsidy was flat funded.
Correct.
And certainly our special ed costs were not flat in terms of increases. I will also say that our present state legislators, Representative Vitale, Representative Zabel, Senator Capoletti, all understand this position quite well and advocate for us. If taxpayers are interested in reaching out to anybody in the state legislature, they should reach out to the leadership of the state legislature, you know, to the elected folks who are, you know, the president, the speaker. Those are the folks who drive policy changes in Harrisburg. So I thank the taxpayers of Haverford Township who have borne the burden of this. I remember, you know, even earlier than your chart, there was a year where I think our PESers increase was 0. It was 0. And as you mentioned, we talked about paying extra, and we're not able to. So it's been quite a saga with PESers, and they've been in the news a lot lately.
Yes, they have.
In terms of issues with management there. And I think Martha only said it 3 or 4 times, but I'll say it again. We have absolutely no control over these cost increases. We have, you know, the state sets the rates for the pension contributions. On the special ed side, when Congress passed IDEA a long time ago, when Jimmy Carter was president, they said that they were going to fund 40% of the excess costs. They've never funded more than 16% of the excess costs. So again, I thank the taxpayers of Haverford Township who have borne those costs, and we have no latitude there. It's federal law. We are required to pay for those services, besides the fact that it's the right thing to do. So thank you, Martha.
Any other questions?
To, yeah, add that, I appreciate you getting on the soapbox, as I've learned more about the Piecers situation. It's infuriating. Like, you look back and it has been long periods of mismanagement, poor decisions, in contrast to the presentation we just had about planning ahead and preparing and making those investments for the long-term success of our district. You don't see that at Piecers. You look at Piecers scandal in the news now, and it is just infuriating that this is, like, I was on a call sometime in just the past couple of months, and, you know, whatever their investment decisions are arguably more costly than they should be to manage and administer. Like, if you just kind of did an investment decision like most of us do for our retirement funds, you'd outperform Piecers year after year, and it is frustrating. But I also wanted to echo the sentiment here. I know there's lots of people in our community who are interested in maintaining quality public education and channeling some of their advocacy, as Larry indicated, to these unfunded mandates. Would be a great place to not just help public education in our district, but statewide. And I was going to just ask Larry to comment, since I know that he has shared this information from the governor's recent budget proposal, which is not, you know, expected to actually be the funding that we will get, but it is indicative of a vision in Pennsylvania where there is more fair funding from the state, and the chart that I saw shows the benefits to our district. We are a growing district. Having more money come through that fair funding formula would be an offset to the funds that we need to raise locally. There are also proposed additional monies to go to the 100 least well-off districts, some of which are neighboring districts here in Delaware County, and they would get supplemental funds to help catch them up in their ability to fund their education programs. I just wondered if Larry wanted to shed some light on that, because that's another area of kind of advocacy that our community could engage in.
I don't happen to have those charts with me this evening. I can speak to that in my legislative report at the next board meeting, though. So that's just off the presses. I mean, the governor just spoke
Right.
this week, so.
Anything else? I'll run back. I have one more thing for the agenda that I forgot to put on the agenda, and I apologize to Dr. Rushi. It's fine. As you've been aware, the district did a demographic study, enrollment, and the next step of this would be a facility study. Dr. Rushi?
So what we would like to, to look at is going out to bid for a facility study that would help us to look not only at that enrollment, but would also take a very in-depth look at all of our facilities in terms of age of roof, age of like all of the other systems, and help us continue to look at, we are now in a project, in a number of projects that we started to take a look at the last time a demographic study was done, and looking at how we needed to plan for increased enrollment in our buildings. This could take a look at how much capacity do we actually have in the remaining buildings moving forward. So we would look to, at this point in time, we would, issue bid for that work. Would certainly come back to the full board before awarding that bid and discuss the scope of work that it would entail. But we're going to look at collecting that information so that we can bring it forward to you.
And that's everything on my agenda.
Okay. The next item on the agenda is public comment, if we have anybody who would like to speak. All right, could you please come and just state your name and confirm your residency in the township?
Hi, my name is Joy Baxter, and I live at 1713 Sue Ellen Drive. I'm a member of the Clean Energy Co-op, and I just want to nudge you that we look forward to possibly working with you for whether solar installation at Linwood, and hopefully we'll be able to set up a meeting with Provident Energy soon to be able to, so they can make a recommendation to you guys. And I have a couple comments and just maybe questions you guys might ask some of the people who made presentations today. One is there ever flooding in the bus yard? Because if there is, maybe this is a good time to, instead of taking out material, just kind of raise it up. And then also the other is, it's a very big area that's paved. Is there I don't know what the cost difference would be to have a permeable surface there. So instead of going right into the Darby Creek, that it sinks into the ground. And then I support looking at getting a pilot of an electric bus or two. Instead of looking at the direct cost, the initial cost, I would say look at the lifetime cost. The 7-year battery replacement is a little not so nice, but at least, you know, like if you were looking at a 12-year cost altogether with, you know, the fuel and everything, I think maybe that's a better one to look at than just the initial cost. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for being here, Joy.
Are there any comments from the board members in conclusion?
I just want to say that I have reached out to Provident Energy to arrange for the sessions that Joy was referring to. They haven't gotten back to me yet, so that we can pick out dates and arrange for the presentations internally, but I have reached out.
Great.
All right, thank you. We can be adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.